Hey Sugar Snaps, welcome to the Textile Indie YouTube channel. My name is Brittany and today we're working on part 3 of my rag rug weaving series. In this video, I'm going to share the techniques to start weaving your rag rug, as well as a little discussion on body posture while weaving and motivation. In last week's video, I shared how to warp your loom so that you're ready to go for this project. If you haven't watched that video, check the description below. I've linked all the previous videos down there so that you can get prepared for today's content. Now I'll show you how to get started with your weaving. You're going to choose a color of the fabric that you're going to start out with and connect a few together. So I have connected 3 pieces here together with my little starting knots. If you didn't watch last week's video on how to connect your fabric and warp your loom, go ahead and check the description below. I have links to that there. Now I'm going to offset the ends of this fabric so that they don't end at the exact same spot, and then fold it in half. So thread it through like this. And now I'm going to weave from the left to the right because I'm right-handed and that feels most comfortable to start out with. If you're left-handed, you can start out on the left or the right side and go back right, but we will be weaving back and forth anyway, so where you start doesn't necessarily matter as much. Now, the first strand of your warp, we're going to attach to the metal bar on the side of the loom. If your loom doesn't have this metal bar on the side, that's okay. You can just loop your fabric around this first piece of the warp. The benefit of having this metal bar is that it runs up both sides of my loom, and so I can weave around it, and it will help maintain the rectangular shape of my rug as I weave. So I'm going to take one end of my piece of fabric and send it underneath the metal bar and this first piece of warp, and then pull this through to that place that I offset. And now bring this in and tuck it close to the starting position, or the pegs, for me those are nails, on your loom. Now take the piece that's on top of this first piece of warp, this piece here. I'm going to bundle this up in my hand to make it easier to work with. Lift up your second piece of warp and tuck this under that second piece. So the technique I'm showing you right now is called twining, and if you've done any basket weaving or the tapestry series I did last year, this may look familiar. Twining is a classic weaving technique both in basketry and weaving structures on fabric, so this is one that's good to know and kind of have in your repertoire. What it is essentially a figure 8 around each warp strand. So what you'll be doing is the fabric that's on top of the last warp that you looped around, this one's going to come under the next warp. So I had just gone under and over this first warp, or sorry, the second warp. Now for the third warp fabric, I'm going to go under with that top piece of fabric. So if you keep your materials on top of the loom so that they're floating on top of your warp, it's going to make it a lot easier to figure out which piece needs to go where. So now this piece of fabric that's going under this third warp strand, that's going to stay put, and I'm going to take this other bundle of fabric that's going over that third warp. We're going to go up and grab the fourth warp fabric and go under with this new piece. So you're creating little crisscrosses and essentially switching these back and forth so that they switch positions. So now this piece of fabric is going on top of the fourth warp. I'm going to lift up my fifth warp and go under. And as you're working, especially if you're working with fabric that's the same color, it can be easy to miss warp threads. So just come in with your hand, go under, and make sure you're separating your warp threads as you weave so that you're only catching the one that you're on and you're not missing any behind that gets stuck behind. So again, the twining is the one that's on top comes up and under the following warp fabric. So this one now is under, so I'm going to leave that. Don't worry about touching that one for this stitch. Take the one that's on top, find your next warp thread and go under, like so. And now as I go, I'm pressing this down close to those nails because this top edge here, or for me, it will be the bottom edge of what I'm weaving. These loops, the warp loops, we'll be popping those off eventually once the rug is totally done, and you want this kind of tight so that you don't end up with a little bit of a bubble of the warp fabric coming underneath. So again, especially on the loop around your nails, make sure that you're catching both sides of that loop. So where the fabric comes down this way around the nail and up, I'm going to make sure to catch that warp fabric and loop around that one as well, so that it doesn't end up behind my warp and get forgotten. So we'll continue across like so, creating those warp stitches and coming in and packing these in close. If you have a tool like a wide tooth comb or something that the fabric will fit in between, you can use that to come in and press your rows together. Once we have a few rows in place, the fabric will sort of create a tight bundle, and it'll be a little bit easier to pack down as we go. But for now, I'm going to use my hands so that you don't have to have the extra tool if you don't want to find something that suits that process. Okay, now I'm going to do the turn on this end. So I've done two different colors here to make it a little bit easier to see. I have my green piece here, and we'll call this piece the brown one. So I've done my twining up until this last warp. And this strand, I'm going to hold taut, this green strand here. I'm going to take the brown strand under the green one, take it over the first warp and under the second warp, and pull that length all the way through. So then it sits over here on the rest of my warp. Now I'm going to keep it kind of far away. I'm not going to pack it down just yet, because now I'm going to take this green piece, bring it under the first warp, and then up in this space right here. So the brown is going to kind of lift away. The green's going to come up right next to it, closest to the weaving, and then pull tight on both ends, pack those in. And now, as you start your twining, you can continue twining the same way as you were before, where the one on top goes up and under, the one on top goes up and under. And you can pack those rows, and then you can see those little V's happening. And because I alternated colors, I'm going to have alternating colors of the V's, like the letter V. When you've gotten to a point where you have about 4 inches left on one of your ends, you're going to come in and overlap 2 ends, and I'm going to incorporate this stripe fabric next into my project. Fold over those 2 ends, they're lined up, and create a little incision, like so. And then we're going to do our splicing technique like we did in last week's video, where we tuck one of these through the hole and then send the end of that same fabric through this hole, pull it through. And then the end of this green stripe is going to go through the hole on the gray stripe, and then pull tight and loop these around so that they kind of curve around themselves like so. And now I have a new length there. I'll do the same thing for this end. And you can change colors whenever you want on your loom project. I'm going to do kind of a multi-stripe rug, mixing in my different colors of fabric. So I'm changing colors pretty quickly here. So now I have 2 additional lengths added to my weft or my weaver. I'll continue twining from here. If you find that your fabric starts to get kind of bubbly because you have a density of material, one solution is you can trim your fabric strips narrower or cut them narrower. One solution that I find to be easier than that, however, is coming in and combining 2 warp strips together and twining them as one. So if you go along, you're twining, if you find a place that's really tight, you can establish 2 strips as one. So I've done that right over here in this stitch where this was kind of thick. I combined the 2, twined over it, and now this will be 1 warp. And you'll establish this and then continue weaving in that manner for the remainder of your rug. So figure that out. The first several rows, I'm on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm on my 10th row here, and I'm establishing those combined warps, and then from there on, that will be how I weave this rug. I won't shift it or change it from there. Here I'm just a little bit less than halfway through this warp on my rag rug. So I'm going to allow these ends to hang out on top of the weaving and flip my loom around so that I can weave from the other end. So now I'll start weaving from this end, and we'll start the same way we started the first end with a new length of fabric. A rag rug is a pretty big project, and I wanted to share some tips that I use to stay motivated in my fiber arts projects, because they all tend to take a long time and be fairly repetitive in the techniques that I'm using. My first tip is to establish a set time of the day that you're going to work on your project, whether that's first thing in the morning or in the evening. Having kind of a bookmarked time frame that you know that's when I work on my project is really helpful, because it becomes part of your routine and then you actually spend time doing it. My second tip is do a row a day challenge. So whether it's your rag rug or knitting or whatever it is you're doing, setting a specific amount of work challenge for yourself for a rag rug, doing just one row a day. And that might take a long time to finish your rug, but you're actually making forward progress, and you've set a goal, you know what that goal is. And then if you utilize tip number 1 and you schedule yourself a time every day to work on that, then you know you don't have to sit there for long periods of time, maybe 10 minutes to finish a row. You'll get your row done and have a little bit of creative space for that day, and then be able to move on with your other responsibilities, knowing you've actually made some progress. Okay, tip number 3 may just apply to me, I'm not sure, but sometimes the amount of time something spends in my brain starts to lessen the motivation of actually working on that thing. So if time starts to drag out, I start to have what I call a moldy project syndrome, where the project has been in my brain for so long, kind of like bread in the fridge, that it starts to get moldy. And there's a point where I either don't want to work on it anymore, or I wish I had the motivation to work on it, but it's just not happening. So at this point, something that I often put into place is just going full out on that project, whether that's spending a full weekend day, with breaks of course, so you can stretch, but a full weekend day doing that one project and just seeing if you can make some good headway or good project progress on your project. Then that kind of gives a boost of motivation to see progress happen or even finish the thing completely. Tip 4 is kind of the opposite of tip 3. Tip 4 is work with the ebbs and flows of your interest for that project. So if you're not motivated to work on your project, just don't. I am a big fan of having many different projects going at once. Not everybody is, I understand that. If that's not your flavor, that is quite all right. It happens to be my favorite flavor. So if I'm not interested in, let's say, finishing my rag rug, I'll pick up one of my other projects and work on that for a while. And usually the interest to get back to a rag rug project or whatever does come. And so then I'll make some progress on it for a while and then set it aside again. And so it's a lot slower pace, but I'm still making progress. It's just going to be finished in a longer time frame, which really the time frame in which you finish a project is sort of self-inflicted. So who says it can't take a long time to finish your rag rug? And tip number 5 is just at the start of a project, choosing what your mindset is going to be. Are you dead set on finishing this specific project in a specific time frame? And if so, run with that and find ways to stay motivated, whether that's scheduling it in to your daily routine or just working on it all at once over a weekend, whatever works best for your schedule and your brain. Or you might start it with the intention of doing it while you enjoy it and then ditching the project in the process because you get bored of it. And hey, you know, there's no fault or problem with doing that. There are many projects that I have left behind because I got to the point where I learned the technique that I had wanted to learn, or I had the enjoyment out of the project that I wanted to have, and then I lost interest, or it no longer was applicable to my life, or some other reason. And so leaving projects behind is really up to you whether you're going to feel bad about that or not, but I would encourage you not to feel bad about it, because the journey is the destination, and getting to explore and experience lots of different things, especially in creativity, means that your creative journey has a lot of dimension and depth, and the outcome or the product doesn't always have to be the thing that your goal is aimed at. That was a lot of words to say. You don't have to finish every single project you start. Shocking. I want to talk a little bit about body posture when you're doing your rag weaving, and really any fiber art that you do, because fiber arts tend to be more repetitive work, like knitting. You end up knitting in one position for long periods of time, or weaving, you're going to be doing the same kind of technique for the remainder of this weaving. Even if you do different techniques, it's the same kind of body posture. So I'm not a medical professional and I don't have any medical training, so don't take this as medical advice, but just from personal experience, something that I've learned more recently is that I have a really hard time getting up and moving in the midst of a project, because I get really focused and I want to spend good quality time just diving deep into my project and allowing my brain to go to kind of another place. And recently had a chiropractic appointment, and my chiropractor said, Brittany, you need to move every 20 to 30 minutes and move your body, move positions, do it differently. I've been pretty bad at doing this sort of thing, and so I'm trying to get better, and I invite you to do the same. Work on taking the time to stretch or get up and move around in the midst of your projects. I am a big fan of doing what I do, and I want to do it for a long time. So finding ways to make sure that I'm supporting this body that I'm in, so that I can continue to do these kind of projects. So specific to rag weaving, what I wanted to suggest, in going back to last week's video, I talked about creating a weaving space, somewhere that you want to weave and that's comfortable, and that you have a supportive chair, or you can sit on the floor, or somewhere that you're just going to want to spend time in and want to make progress on your weaving. Something I want to encourage you this week is, as you're working in that space, try to change up your position, and even have a little timer next to you that's set for 20 to 30 minutes, and get up and stretch and move every 20 to 30 minutes to reset, and just keep the blood flowing and keep the motivation going, so you're not hunched over in a little ball the entire weaving project. So for me, what that looks like is taking my loom and setting it up against my shelves back here and weaving in this space back here, or setting it up against the coffee table and sitting at my couch, or even on the floor, but just changing it up. And this, it's big, but it's pretty mobile because it's just a frame loom, and so you can move it around your space and work in different situations. So that makes rug loom weaving really nice. You're not having to sit in the same position at a huge loom that's not mobile. In next week's video, I'll go over how to take your rag rug off the loom, finish it, and how to care for your rag rug so that it lasts as long as possible. I want to invite you to use this QR code to sign up for my email update list. We send out a twice-a-month email with all of the updated content from all of our different platforms, and I'd love for you to be a part of that community. Thanks so much for joining me in this rag rug project. It's been really fun seeing everyone commenting and sharing their experience, as well as diving into their own rag rug weaving projects. I've heard from some of you that these videos have been really helpful, so thanks for watching. I'm glad I'm able to do this project with you and help you along the way. I hope you're enjoying your rag rug project. Until next week, happy making, friends. See you later.